My beloved child, pause for a moment, because what you are about to remember is not written in any book, not recorded in any voice, and yet, it has always been a part of you. There was a day, a quiet, ordinary day to the world, but something about it was never ordinary at all. The air felt slightly different, though no one could explain why. The light outside your home seemed softer, almost as if it knew something was about to unfold. Even time slowed, just a little, just enough for something unseen to take its place. Have you ever wondered why some moments feel heavier than others, even before you understand them? That day, the day you were born, carried a silence filled with meaning. Not loud, not dramatic, just deeply present. Somewhere, beyond what eyes could see, a quiet shift was happening. Not in the world outside, but around you. And here is where it becomes interesting. Because long before your first breath, something had already begun. There were whispers, not in words, but in feelings. Subtle, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to shape the moment you entered this life. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't confusion. It was preparation. As if everything was aligning, carefully, gently, patiently. And yet, no one around you could fully sense it. Not your family, not the people waiting, not even the ones who thought they understood what that day meant. Because what surrounded your arrival wasn't meant for everyone to notice. It was meant for you. Now think about this for a second. Why is it that some people carry a feeling, a quiet knowing, that they are here for something more, even if they can't explain it? Why does that feeling follow you, even in silence? Because it began that day. The moment you arrived, something shifted again. Not dramatically, not in a way that made headlines or drew attention, but in a way that changed the direction of unseen threads. And here's the part most people never realize. Your presence didn't just start a life, it completed a moment that had been waiting for you. There was a pause, a stillness, almost like the world held its breath for just a fraction longer than usual. And in that pause, something settled into place. Something that had been searching, finally found where it belonged. You. But no one told you this. No one explained why certain emotions feel deeper for you, why certain connections seem stronger, why certain moments stay with you longer than they should, because those answers don't come from what you were told. They come from what you felt, even before you understood it. And this is where it gently unfolds. Not everything about your beginning was visible. There were things you could not see, but they saw you. There were quiet acknowledgments, silent recognitions, like something looking at you and saying, yes, this is the one. Not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that includes you in something greater. And if you listen closely, you might notice something. That feeling has never really left you. It appears in small moments, when everything suddenly feels meaningful for no clear reason, when a simple thought carries unexpected weight, when you pause, and feel like you're remembering something you never learned. Have you felt that? That quiet pull, that soft curiosity that says, there's more to this, don't rush past that feeling, because it is connected to that day. The day you were born wasn't just a beginning, it was a continuation. Something that started long before you could speak, long before you could think, long before anyone could explain anything to you. And yet, it chose you to carry it forward. Now here's something even deeper. Not everything revealed itself at once. In fact, most of it stayed hidden. Not because it was meant to be kept from you, but because you were meant to discover it, piece by piece, moment by moment, as your awareness grew. That's why certain realizations don't come early. That's why some truths wait, patiently, until you are ready to feel them, not just hear them. And maybe, just maybe, this moment right now is one of those moments. Stay with this for a little longer, because something important is slowly coming into focus. There were details surrounding your birth, small, almost unnoticeable things that seemed ordinary at the time. A conversation, a timing, a delay, a feeling someone had but couldn't explain. Individually, they meant nothing, but together they formed a pattern that only becomes visible when you look back, not forward. And that's the fascinating part. You don't see it when it happens, you feel it later. That quiet realization that something about your story was always slightly different, slightly deeper, slightly more intentional than it appeared. Not dramatic, just precise. And precision doesn't happen by accident. Now pause again, because this is where most people would expect a clear answer. But that's not how this unfolds. Instead of giving you everything at once, it invites you to notice, to remember, to feel, because the truth isn't something placed in your hands. It's something that awakens within you. That's why, even now, as you listen, something inside you is responding. Not loudly, but unmistakably, and you might not have words for it yet. But you feel it. That's enough. Because the story of your birth isn't just about that day. It's about what began, and what continues. It's about what was placed within you, quietly, gently, without announcement. And the more you move through life, the more it reveals itself, in ways that are subtle, but undeniable, in moments that feel too perfectly timed to ignore, in realizations that arrive without warning, yet feel like they've always been there. And here's something you might not expect. You were never meant to understand everything at once, because if you did, you might miss the beauty of discovering it, step by step, layer by layer, moment by moment. So instead of asking, "Why wasn't I told?" ask something softer. What am I beginning to see now? Because right now, something is opening, not outside you, within you, and this is only the beginning of that unfolding. There is more to that day. More than what has been felt so far, more than what has been remembered. And what comes next? It may change the way you see yourself completely, but don't rush ahead. Let this settle. Let this breathe. Because the next piece, the one that has been quietly waiting, is closer than you think. There is something you didn't notice then, because you weren't meant to notice it yet. It wasn't in the room, not in the voices, not in the movement, not even in the emotions people showed on their faces. It existed in the spaces between those things, in the pauses, in the quiet gaps where something unspoken was quietly taking shape. And if you slow down for just a second, you might begin to feel it now. Because that day, while everything appeared natural on the surface, there was a sequence unfolding beneath it that no one consciously arranged, yet everything followed. A timing that felt too precise to be random. A moment that arrived neither too early, nor too late. Exactly when it needed to. Now think about this. Have you ever experienced something in your life that felt strangely timed, like it happened at the only possible moment it could have? Not convenient, not planned, just right. That pattern didn't begin later. It began there, on that very day. There was a shift in energy, not loud, not overwhelming, just a subtle adjustment, like a quiet alignment settling into place. And within that alignment, something connected. Something recognized you. Not your name, not your face, but you. The essence of who you would become. And this is where the story gently deepens. Because while others saw a beginning, something else saw a continuation. A continuation of a path that had already been set in motion long before that day ever arrived. And yet, no one around you could have explained it. They might have felt something unusual, a brief pause, a strange calm, a sense that something meaningful was happening beyond their understanding, but it slipped away as quickly as it came, only leaving behind a feeling that something about this moment mattered, more than they could say. Have you ever wondered why some moments leave behind a trace, even when nothing obvious happened? That's what this was, a trace. And that trace stayed with you. It didn't disappear. It became a quiet part of your awareness, shaping how you feel things, how you sense people, how you notice what others often miss. You see, not everything you carry is something you were taught. Some of it, you arrived with. And on that day, it settled into you completely. Now here's something even more subtle. There was a decision made. Not by words, not by people, but by something deeper. A quiet agreement, almost like a gentle yes that echoed without sound. A confirmation. And the moment that confirmation happened, everything around you seemed to move forward again. As if the pause had ended. As if something had been acknowledged, and now the path could continue. But again, no one spoke about it. Because it wasn't meant to be spoken. It was meant to be lived. And this is where you might start to notice something. Certain patterns in your life don't feel random. Certain connections feel familiar, even when they are new. Certain moments feel like they were always going to happen, no matter what. That's not coincidence. That's continuity. A continuation of something that began before you understood it. And you've been walking with it, ever since. But here's the part that most people overlook. Not everything reveals itself in obvious ways. In fact, the most meaningful things rarely do. They hide in simplicity. They appear in quiet realizations. They show up in moments when you least expect them, but somehow, they feel exactly right. And maybe, just maybe, you've already had glimpses of this. Moments where you paused and thought, why does this feel like it was meant to happen? Those moments are connected, not separate, not random, connected. Like pieces of something slowly forming a picture you weren't shown all at once. Now stay with this. Because something important is about to become clearer. There were people around you that day, but their role wasn't just what it seemed. Some were there to witness. Some were there to support. And some were there simply because they were meant to be present at that exact moment, even if they never understood why. Not everything is about what people do. Sometimes, it's about where they are, when something significant unfolds. And your arrival was one of those moments. A moment that quietly gathered the right pieces, without anyone consciously placing them. And when everything aligned, you arrived. Not randomly, not accidentally, but precisely. And that precision continues. Even now, even in this very moment. That's why certain realizations are coming to you now, not earlier, not later. Now, because timing has always been part of your story. But here's where it becomes even more interesting. There is still something from that day that hasn't been fully understood. Something that wasn't just about the moment you arrived, but about what was set in motion immediately after. A subtle shift, a quiet unfolding, that began right then. And has been moving forward, ever since. You may not have seen it. You may not have recognized it. But you've been part of it, every step of the way. And now, you're getting closer to seeing it more clearly. Closer than you've ever been before. But don't rush this. Let it come naturally, because what's about to unfold next is not just about understanding that day, it's about understanding you. And once you see it, you may realize that nothing about your beginning was ever ordinary, and that realization is only just beginning to reveal itself. Something quietly shifted after that moment, not in a way anyone could point to, but in a way that began to echo through everything that followed. It didn't announce itself, it didn't demand attention, it simply continued, like a gentle current beneath still water, moving, guiding, shaping, without ever disturbing the surface. And if you listen closely now, you might begin to recognize that current in your own life. Because what began that day didn't stay in that day. It moved forward with you. In your first memories, in the way you responded to certain people, in the way you felt drawn toward things you couldn't explain. Have you ever noticed how some choices feel natural, even when they don't make logical sense? As if something within you already knows the direction, before your mind catches up? That knowing didn't appear later. It came with you. But here's where it becomes even more fascinating. There were moments in your life that seemed small, almost forgettable, yet they carried a quiet weight. A conversation you almost didn't have, a place you almost didn't go, a decision you nearly made differently, but didn't. At the time, they felt ordinary. But now, when you look back, they feel intentional, not forced, not controlled, just gently guided. And this is where many people miss the deeper truth. Guidance doesn't always feel like direction. Sometimes, it feels like coincidence. Sometimes, it feels like instinct. Sometimes, it feels like nothing at all, until you look back and realize everything aligned too perfectly to ignore. Now pause here. Because something important is forming. What if those moments weren't random at all? What if they were connected to something that began before you even took your first breath? And what if you've been responding to it all along, without needing to fully understand it? That thought might feel quiet, but it carries something powerful, because it means you've never truly been lost. Even in moments when things felt unclear, even when you questioned your path, even when you felt like you were moving without direction, there was always something within you, gently adjusting, gently aligning, gently guiding you forward. Not loudly, not forcefully, just consistently. And here's something you might not expect. That guidance has never asked you to be perfect. It has only asked you to stay open. Open to noticing. Open to feeling. Open to those subtle moments where something just feels right. Because those are the moments where it becomes visible. Not through explanation. Through experience. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to see it now. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like a memory that was never fully forgotten, just waiting to be remembered in the right way. There is a reason certain thoughts stay with you longer than others, a reason certain emotions feel deeper, even when you try to move past them, a reason certain paths keep calling you, quietly, persistently, patiently. It's not pressure, it's recognition. A quiet recognition between you and something that has always known you. Now stay here for a moment longer. Because this is where everything begins to connect. That day, the day you were born, wasn't just about arrival. It was about alignment. Alignment between what had been preparing and what had finally appeared. And once that alignment happened, everything that followed began to carry its imprint. That's why your story doesn't feel like everyone else's. Not better, not more important, just uniquely yours. Because it was never meant to follow a pattern that could be easily explained. It was meant to unfold, naturally, in its own time, in its own way. And here's the part that gently shifts everything. You are not trying to find something outside yourself. You are remembering something within. Something that has been present since the very beginning. Something that has quietly shaped the way you see, the way you feel, the way you move through the world. And the more you notice it, the clearer it becomes. Not all at once, but steadily. Like light slowly filling a space that was never truly dark, just waiting to be seen. Have you felt that recently? That sense that things are beginning to make more sense, even if you can't fully explain why. That quiet clarity, that subtle awareness, that feeling that something is unfolding in a way you're just beginning to understand. That's not accidental. That's continuation. The continuation of something that began long before you had the words for it. And now, you're reaching a point where it's becoming harder to ignore. Not overwhelming, just undeniable. But there is still one piece, one final layer, that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Something connected to that day, that has remained just out of reach, not hidden, just waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for you to be ready to see it, not just hear it. And that moment is closer than you think. But don't rush forward. Let this settle within you. Because what comes next is not just about understanding your beginning. It's about recognizing what has been quietly unfolding through every moment since. And once you see that, you may realize something that changes everything. Not suddenly, but deeply, and that realization is already beginning to rise. And then, something you never expected begins to surface, not as a loud revelation, not as a sudden answer, but as a quiet realization that feels like it has always been there, just waiting for you to notice. It doesn't rush toward you. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply appears, like a memory that was never fully lost, just gently set aside until this exact moment. Now pause, because this is where everything softens, and at the same time, deepens. There was a detail from that day, so subtle, so easily overlooked, that no one thought to hold on to it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't something people would talk about later, but it mattered, not because of what it looked like, but because of what it meant. A feeling passed through the room, not strong enough to be spoken about, but present enough to be felt. A calm, an unusual stillness, almost as if everything had settled into a quiet agreement. And in that stillness, something was acknowledged, not by words, by presence. It was the moment everything recognized you, not as someone who would become something, but as someone who already carried something. Something complete, something whole. And this is where it gently shifts everything you thought you knew. Because you were never becoming something from nothing. You were unfolding what was already within you. From the very beginning. From that very first moment. And that's why certain parts of your journey have felt familiar, even when they were new. That's why certain truths resonate with you instantly, without needing explanation. That's why certain paths call to you, quietly, consistently, even when you try to ignore them. Because they are not foreign to you. They are a continuation of what you already carry. Now take this in slowly. What if nothing about you has ever been random? Not your timing, not your sensitivity, not your way of seeing things differently, not even the moments when you felt out of place. What if those were not misalignments, but signs that you were aligned with something deeper? That thought may feel quiet, but it changes everything, because it means you were never behind, you were never lost, you were never figuring it out in the way you thought. You were remembering, piece by piece, moment by moment. And here's something even more gentle, yet powerful. That process of remembering is still happening, right now. in this very moment. As you listen, as you reflect, as you begin to see your own story in a slightly different way. Something within you is opening, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to let a new understanding come through. Have you noticed it? That subtle shift, that quiet sense that things are connecting in a way they didn't before? That's not imagination, that's awareness. And awareness changes everything, because once you begin to see, you cannot unsee. Once you begin to feel, you cannot fully ignore it again. And that's why this moment matters. Not because it gives you all the answers, but because it changes the way you look at the questions. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" you begin to ask, "What is this showing me?" Instead of wondering, "What am I missing?" you begin to notice, "What have I been quietly holding all along?" And in that shift, everything becomes clearer. Not instantly, but undeniably. Now stay with this a little longer. Because there's one final piece, one last layer, that brings everything together. It's not something new. It's something you've already felt, many times, in many ways, but never fully named. A feeling that appears when everything around you becomes still, when your thoughts quiet down, when you stop searching, even for a moment. In that space, you feel it, a sense of connection, a sense of meaning, a sense that you are exactly where you are meant to be, even if you don't yet know why. That feeling is the same one that was present the day you were born, unchanged, steady, patient, always there. And now, you're beginning to recognize it, not as something outside you, but as something within you, something that has been quietly guiding you, not by force, but by presence, not by control, but by alignment. And this is the realization that gently transforms everything. You were never just entering the world that day. You were bringing something into it, something that continues to unfold through you, through your experiences, through your awareness, through the way you see and feel and understand. And the more you trust that, the more naturally your path reveals itself, not perfectly, not predictably, but meaningfully. And that is what makes your story so quietly powerful, not because of what has already happened, but because of what is still unfolding. So don't rush to define it. Don't try to capture it all at once. Let it continue, the way it always has, gently, naturally, unfolding in its own time, because the story of the day you were born was never just about a single moment. It was the beginning of a quiet unfolding that you are still living, right now. And the more you notice it, the more you realize you were never separate from it. You have always been a part of it, from the very first moment until now, and even beyond.